Hello, everyone. We are on module 3. Slide here says lecture 2. I should say lecture 3. Let me change that real quick. All right, module 3, making the music and record labels. So today we're going to talk about the whole songwriting process, producers, the first foundation pillar of artist development. So I've created these 4 pillars to artist development, which we're going to talk about in this class, because it's something very important for artist managers to be aware of, and for artists as well, of course. So these are 4 pillars that should be part of every artist development strategy, and artist development is something that never stops, right? So regardless if you are picking up a guitar for the first time today and you're starting to learn how to play and starting to write lyrics to music eventually, to being the Rolling Stones, I don't know, the biggest artist I can think of, or Taylor Swift, right? Artist development never stops. It's something that always continues. And there's these 4 pillars I created kind of for the classroom setting of what should be part of every artist's career. So we're going to talk about the first pillar today. We're talking about writing and co-writing. We'll talk about producers and a little bit about labels. We'll talk about your midterm assignment and your next quiz. And also just some housekeeping. The grades for the previous quiz will be done by the end of this week. So by Sunday, those will be done. There's nothing really else too. So the next quiz we do this Sunday at 11:59. So we'll get to that in just a second. Before we get to that, which shows did you see this week? Remember, we got to go see shows, meet people, make stuff if you want to be in the music industry, right? So what shows did I see? I had a few shows, quite a few. I went to go see a show too. On top of working shows, I go see shows on the days off. A little crazy. But I went to go see Guns N' Roses in Jacksonville, which is my favorite band in the world. And it's the first concert I've ever been to. It was Guns N' Roses in 1993. So it was cool to see them again. I worked Bad Sons, which is a really cool indie rock band. Worked the show with a band called Grandson, like your grandson, and Bad Son's like bad, like the sun that's in the sky, right? But Grandson is awesome. They're a really great rock band. They reminded me a lot of a modern like Rage Against the Machine. Really cool music and a lot of really cool message behind it. Then I got to work a show with Peppa Pig. It's very different and interesting. Did a show with John Medeski, legendary jazz and just legendary musician. It was a really cool show. That was in Ponte Vedra. And then I got to work a show last night with a band called Through the Roots. So I've been on the road a lot and getting sick in between, which is why we had to push this lecture back. But back in almost full force and gonna try to save my voice as much as possible, but should be able to power through this session. Next quiz, we're gonna do a song analysis. So I'm gonna send the instructions for this quiz out, hopefully today, if not tomorrow. But basically we're gonna do, so this first quiz that you guys did was the artist selection assignment, where you had to go select an artist. And now you're going to be the A&R, or the manager, right? And you're gonna go through their music. And if they have an album out or an EP out, go through their most recent album or EP and listen to their music and figure out what should be the first single, the follow-up single, and the third single, right? So if you were the A&R and the manager, in what sequence would you release their music? So I want you to tell me why you choosing the order of what you're choosing. You don't need to pick the singles that they picked, right? You might feel as the artist manager that there might be a better single out there. So like related to other music in that genre, related to what is doing well, maybe related to the message, like the lyrics behind the music. Is that message something that's more relevant right now than maybe the single they've released? So you're going to do an analysis of the 3 songs you would release. You're going to tell me the song they did release, or maybe the order they released them. Just tell me the first single they released, because some artists may not release 3 singles. But you tell me the first single they released and kind of compare what your thoughts are based on what you feel like the sequence should be of the first 3 songs versus what the artist may have done. And I'll get you guys some more detailed directions on that. It's a new assignment for this class. It's something that'd be cool, especially since we're talking about songs and music and creating songs. So that'll be your next quiz. So I'll send that out soon. Then next, let's do copyright revisited. Some of you guys didn't have me for Music Business 1, and I'm not sure what your knowledge is when it comes to copyright and publishing and all that. So copyright. So here's we have this lovely these two circles, these two charts. So every song has two copyrights, right? And they're the composition and the sound recording. So if you go to copyright.gov and you register your copyright, those are the two copyrights you're registering: the composition and the sound recording. If you do the copyright for the sound recording, you copyright both in the same copyright. But if you wrote the composition, you haven't recorded it yet, so you say you have sheet music and lyrics written down on paper or on a Word document, then you can just copyright those as the composition and then go back later to copyright the sound recording once you have a demo for it. And to copyright the sound recording, it doesn't need to be the final version. It can be a demo of the song, because that gives you ownership, right? So once you register the copyright, now you have ownership. Now, to each copyright works a little different. And if you have not taken my Music Business 1 class and this is new to you, I really want to encourage you guys to learn about this topic, especially as artist managers, especially as artists. If you guys want to get into the label side or producer side of the industry, it's highly important you learn how the copyrights work and how songs get paid, right, for your copyright. So there's a podcast I did. Let me pull it up real quick. Let me see, the copyright masterclass that I did. So if you go to the podcast, it's episode 56, and by now you guys should be familiar on how to get to the podcast. What's this additional materials? If not, it should have been. But you definitely want to learn about copyright and publishing. I have a master class. I'll try to remember to send the link out. And if I forget, for some reason I forget, and you want to revisit that, definitely ask for the link to that. But there's two copyrights: the composition and the sound recording, or the sound recording is also called the master, right? So if you write a song in your room, you wrote the music, you wrote the lyrics, you recorded it as a demo, you now own both copyrights 100%. You own 100% of the composition and you own 100% of the sound recording. The composition has two parts. Sometimes this can be written as two 100% pies, just to make the math a little easier. Or really, like if you're kind of like me, a pie is only 100%. There's no such thing as 200%, so it's just going to split it into 50-50. So half of the pie is the publisher's share, and the other half is the writer's share. And when you write a song in your room on your own and you record it on your own, you own both the publisher's share and the writer's share, right? You own your publishing and you own your writing. So now let's add a couple of layers of complexity. I'm not going to go too deep into this. Definitely encourage you guys to revisit that podcast if to refreshing on this. But just for purposes of this class and being an artist manager, let's look a little bit into this. So now, if you start co-writing with other writers, what happens is now you are only affecting the composition, right? So let's say, I don't know, Johnny's writing with Gina, and they're writing a song for Johnny, and Johnny's going to record it. He's going to go in the studio. He's going to release it. So Johnny's going to own the sound recording. But Gina is a co-writer, and let's say they decide to split everything 50-50. So Tommy and Gina split the writer's share half and half, so that's 25% each for the composition, right? And then they split the publisher's share half and half. That's 25% each of the publishing. So they both own 50% of the composition. So that's like one layer of complexity, right? Then you add a licensing agent that is literally pitching your music out to get placed into TV shows, commercials, movies, and so on. And this licensing agent doesn't take any part of your copyright. All they will do is they'll take a commission off the top. So let's say you get a $100,000 song placement. Same scenario that we just had with Tommy and Gina, owning 50-50 of the composition. That $100,000 sync placement gets paid to the composition. So now the sync licensing company takes a commission. Let's say it's 30%. It leaves $70,000, right? You split that in half. 35 goes to Tommy, 35 goes to Gina. Pretty simple still here. Then you add a publishing deal. The publishing company now represents, let's say, Tommy, and Gina's his friend, and she's kind of just like an independent writer, and she doesn't really want to deal with the whole publishing deal thing. So now and let's say it's his first publishing deal. So usually in publishing deals, the publishing company will take automatically all of the publishing, right? So now say Tommy and Gina write a song. They both split the writer's share. That's 25% to each of them. Now the publishing, Tommy's part is owned by his publishing company, right? So Tommy's publishing company, let's call it Universal Publishing. I'm trying to think what the publishing company is called for Universal Music Group. I think it's just Universal Publishing. It's Warner Chappell, Sony Publishing, and there's a different word for Universal now because Warner and Universal are different. I can't think of it right now. But anyways, too big of a side tangent. So let's say the publishing side is assigned to Universal. So Universal owns 25% now of the composition, and then Gina owns 25% of the publisher share, or yeah, so half of the publisher share, so another 25%. So now Gina, actually, the co-writer, owns the majority of the song. She owns 25 or half of the writer's share and half of the publisher's share. So she owns 50% of the song. Tommy owns only half the writer's share, so he owns 25, and Universal owns half of the publishing share, so Universal owns 25%, right? So it get very convoluted and complicated as you start adding people in. Now, when you add in a record label, they don't really mess with the composition piece. They only take over the master, the sound recording. And most of the time, in most record deals, they're going to take 100% of the sound recording. So if your sound recording earns money, that money goes to the label. Now, the artist that records the song or the songwriters can negotiate a royalty, which usually there's a artist royalty, and that could be a certain percentage per dollar made, right? It can be anywhere from like, I don't know, 8 to 22%, depending how well you've negotiated your deal. So you do make a commission of that, but the label will own that most of the time until you're an established artist and you have some leverage, some power to be able to keep part of your master or all your master. So that's how this can get very convoluted and complicated. If you go to, so it'll be a fun exercise. Let's do this. A new share. Oh, I can't share Spotify? That's a bummer. All right, let's go back to the slide. Let me see something real quick. Thought I shared my Spotify last time. Just want to show y'all something. Okay, there we go. So let's go to Spotify. Let's go to the home screen. Let's go to the charts. Right, so now if I'm on charts in Spotify, for example, right? So let's look at the number one song. It's a Travis Scott song right now, highest in the room. So you're gonna if you want to see who has worked on the song, you go click these 3 dots right here, and my chat is covering up this thing. So now I show credits, and now you see here on the credits, right? There is 1, 2, 3, 4 writers and 2 producers on this song. So chances are that these producers, especially in the hip hop world, are also co-writers. So you have 6 writers. All 6 of these writers might all have different publishing deals, and then looks like you also have a label involved as well. 3 labels, for example, even more complicated on this song, right? So you can just really it's a really fun little thing to do, just figure out who songwriters are. But it's song by Post Malone has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 songwriters, 1, 2, 3 producers, so potentially 8. Also, Louis Bell's on both. So potentially 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so 7 different songwriters on this song, right? This is how this can get very, very complicated and convoluted really fast. Let me go back to here. So now if you look at the composition piece, if there's 6 songwriters and 6 potential publishers, right? You could have a few songwriters that have the same publishing, but this is how this can get very confusing really fast. When you split the writer's share up into 6 pieces, the publishing share, let's say 3 pieces, then you have 3 labels, and now your sound recording get split in 3 pieces too, right? So this copyright stuff can get very, very convoluted. So if you need a refresher, definitely check that episode number 56 out with Davey J on the podcast. All right, so next, let's go to the first foundation pillar of artist management. And I see Jenna just joined. Feel free to chime in whenever you want. I have the chat open. You can type into the chat, or if you want to unmute your mic, ask a question, and just mute it back when I go back to the slides. So the first foundation pillar of artist development is songwriting. and most, so earlier I talked about the 4 pillars that I created for of artist development that should be part of every artist's career. And the first 2 pillars, everyone in the music industry will agree. Um, the other 2 depends on their like philosophy, and we'll get into those next week. But the first pillar is songwriting. You have to write the best possible songs you can, and that sounds simple, but a lot of artists, especially when they're first starting out, they'll get really excited if they wrote 10 songs in a year. Um, and 10 songs in a year is not a lot at all. You should be writing every single day. Even if it's just a journal that you're keeping, like writing in your journal every day. So if you're a songwriter or you're an artist manager, you want to encourage your artists to always be writing. Whenever there's an idea, whenever there's kind of emotion or feeling, writing about that idea, writing about those emotions and feelings, writing about their day, um, looking at an object in a room and writing about that object. It's really important to exercise that muscle of just writing constantly, and daily. The most successful songwriters are, writing sometimes in several sessions a day. I just heard this podcast on Joe Rogan where um, Chris Stapleton was on there, and he wrote thousands of songs before he ever got his first record deal. And another podcast I love is called And a Writer Is. And same thing there. Every songwriter they talk to on that podcast, they're constantly writing and working on their craft. It's so important. That's one of the most important pillar, because you can be an artist that's just a songwriter, right? And doesn't perform live, and you can make a big living there. So that's why songwriting is the first and the most important pillar. Artists should always be working on their songs, always be working on their craft. If you're a musician that plays an instrument, you should be always working on your instrument daily for hours and hours at a time. So talking about the musician side of the songwriting part or the melody part, I've done shows with Santana, Kenny G, some amazing musicians, and when they show up to the venue, like a lot of times, like the singers, like if you have like a pop band or a rock band, they won't show up until 3 hours before doors open. So let's say the doors open at 7 o'clock, they'll show up at 4, do an hour sound check, and they're done. These guys like that are like just really known for their craft, for musicianship. They'll show up at noon or 1 o'clock, hang out in their dressing room, and just practice for 2 or 3 hours. Then they'll go do sound check, and they'll do an hour or 2 hour sound check, a very thorough sound check, and then they go back on stage and play, a 2 to 3 hour set. So that's 8 to 9 hours of playing every single day. So just because they're on tour doesn't mean they're not constantly working on their craft. They are constantly playing nonstop. So if you want to be writing music or playing music at the highest level, then you need to do what the people at the highest level have done, especially when they started out. But there's really great examples like Santana that are still working on their craft extremely hard every single day. So the first and most important pillar is mastering your craft, songwriting every day, and playing your instrument every single day. So let's talk a little bit about co-writing. So obviously when you first start writing, it's just you on your own. But in like the whole like music scene, if you look at the Spotify charts, like we just looked at, you see multiple songwriters, like multiple credits on every single song. So co-writing is a really big thing and in the music world. And it's also a way you get a lot better. That's how you get better at your craft. You become a better writer. You learn from other writers. You learn how their thought process is in writing. And there's people that have specialties. So like if the different types of writers, you have someone whose specialty could be just like melody, and all they constantly work on is melody. Then you could have a lyricist, someone that just like writes lyrics. You have some people that are really good at writing stories, and they're good writing like the verses. And then you have people that are really good at writing hooks, the choruses. So sometimes you want to have 3 songwriters in a room, one to work on the melody, one to work on the verses, and then one to work on the hooks, and maybe a 4th to help craft it and put it all together. And again, you don't always have to have a songwriting team, but that's like how it works in the real world. And it's like something really cool to practice, like write with one person first and do that a few times, then write with 3 people, and find what the strengths are of each person, and then work with people that have those different strengths, right? And then more in the mainstream, like pop world or hip hop, EDM, The typical formula is you have a beat maker, so someone that makes the beat. That's why I said earlier that the producers are very likely co-writers on the song as well, because the producers are writing the beats. That's the melody, right? It's half of the songwriting process. And then if you have beat makers, now the people that write the lyrics over the beat, they're called top liners. So they're just writing like lyrics on top of the beats. And a lot of times, like rappers will write their own verses, but then when it comes to choruses, they'll have someone that helps with the choruses, which is why you can see so many songwriters on a rap song. So again, it can get really complicated and convoluted really fast. And sometimes when you see other writers on a song, sometimes just a person being in the room will get songwriting credit. And like the thing they talk about is like that person's energy, just that person being in the room and their energy is contributing to the song. So that person gets songwriter credit, even though it might just be sitting there and watching and observing, right? It's very interesting when it comes to co-writing. How do you find people to write with? So as a manager, since this is an artist management class, I'm gonna focus more on the manager side. It's really important to do two things. One, realize that usually artists are creative people. I mean, I feel like everyone's a creative person, but obviously people are using their creativity to make money, to make art, to express themselves and share that with the world. So they're very vulnerable. So it's important when a manager critiques an artist or tries to find co-writers for the artist that, one, they're mindful of them being creative and potentially a little more sensitive or vulnerable, that they don't hurt their feelings. So it's really important to know your artist really well. Not everyone is. So, for example, Eminem's manager, he's the only one probably in the world that can curse out Eminem and literally tell him what to do, because he's probably going to retaliate against anyone else. So it's also knowing the relationship you have with your artist and earning that trust, so you know how you can talk to your artist. Some managers can be very blunt and very real with their artists, and some managers can't. So it's all about what kind of trust you've earned. But what I'm getting to with this, so whether it's the manager or the artist doing it themselves, it's really important to know what level you're writing at, because the artists tend to think that they're writing at a level higher than they really are. So it's like important for a manager to bring them back down to earth and be very real with them. Just because you've been writing for a year doesn't mean you can start writing with Max Martin or Taylor Swift or Jack Antonoff, right? Or Drake or something. You got to write at your level. So it's the first place to find other writers is open mics. So like look at open mics locally, find other artists in your region, like unsigned artists, and just start writing with other people that are unsigned, just to get in the habit and the practice of writing with these other people. And then one of the important things is like once you find a few people that you gel with, they have just good chemistry with, regardless if you like haven't written anything good yet. It's just good to write with the same people over and over and over again for a while. Like it's almost like dating. If you had like a good first date, but it's not like your dream date, it doesn't mean like, maybe it's a little different, but anyways, it doesn't mean you shouldn't keep going on another date, because you might miss out on something, right? So if you're writing with other writers, just because you have a bad, but just couldn't really put out a really good song on your first session, but if you had really good chemistry on your first songwriting session, it's really worthwhile to just like keep writing together. Because a lot of the really great songwriters and songwriting groups are people that just worked, like locked themselves in a room and wrote songs every single day for weeks and months at a time. And after months, a hit came out. And then a few more months, another hit came out. And all of a sudden, their chemistry was so good that they now can just crank out hits, one hit after another, right? So it's all about reps, getting reps in with the same small group of writers. Like it's more important to find a small group of 2 or 3 writers than it is to write a song with Max Martin or Jack Antonoff, because you're not going to have any chemistry with those guys, because you don't know them as well as the small group of writers that you've been writing with. So it's really important for managers to find a team of writers that your artist gels with. And it's important to really recognize if the craft is getting better, right? So if you've been your artist for a year and you kind of know where they're at writing wise. Now they start writing with this other writer, and you notice the demos and the quality of the lyrics and the melodies are getting better, and your artist is not seeing it yet. It's important to point those things out to them as well, to show them that they're getting better, or who they're writing well with and who not. Some co-writing do's and don'ts. So when your artist goes into a co-writing session, they should always be on time to the session. Bring ideas, so they should bring like their journal, write some ideas down. Should always determine in advance like who or what are you writing for. So are you writing for one of the two artists in the room, or are you writing for a different artist? Discuss the business part up front. It's really awkward when you finish a song and all of a sudden it's a smash hit and you haven't discussed yet who owns the song, right? Because then all of a sudden everyone wrote an equal share of the song. So it's really important to figure out the business stuff up front. Take time to get to know each other. It's more about, one second, take a quick drink. It's more about getting to know the person and bonding with the person than going in and like writing a song in your first session. A lot of times in your first session, you may not write a song at all. It's better like if you have a good, like a really good first session, could be going to meet your co-writer and just really bonding and having just really great conversation. And all of a sudden 2 hours goes by and you're like, oh my God, we haven't like written a song yet. That's still a really good thing because now you've built chemistry and a relationship with that person, and it's going to become a lot easier to write with them. Other notes for do's on a writing session: always be positive and encouraging, right? If someone has an idea and you don't like it, like find the good parts in the idea, and then maybe be able to kindly add some criticism on what you would like better about the idea. And just remember that art is subjective. Like I might think the Beatles are great, and the person next to me might think the Beatles are complete crap. So art is very subjective. So keep that in mind too. So that's why it's really important that just because you think an idea is not good, doesn't mean it's not good. Some don'ts: you don't want your artist to be the overpowering personality in the room. Most people don't want to work with people like that, right? I've had an artist I worked with that was very type A personality, and I'd set them up for some co-writing sessions, and luckily I had a good relationship with the co-writers, and they'd come back to me and saying, hey, like, Chris, I'll do anything for you, but this guy's like just way too much to sit in a room with and write with, right? So that's important to know too. Don't have your artist or you in your writing session just shut down ideas and be overly critical. It's important, again, to keep things positive and encouraging and just add constructive criticism to the conversation. So just a few things on co-writing. So now let's look at producers and engineers, finding your producers. So in Music Business 1, there's this book that the class had to get. It's called How to Make It in the New Music Business. It's by Ari Herstand. It's a really good book, and it kind of splits up producers into different categories in there. So the first category of producer is the beat maker. This is a producer that typically creates and mixes an entire electronic instrumental production on their computer, and then they have a top liner come in when the track is completely finished, right? And this is usually for pop, EDM, hip hop. Those are the genres that usually have a beat maker and a top liner. Then you have what he called the guru. So the guru is kind of like a, if you think about it, like a film director or film producer, they kind of assemble a team. So let's say you're a songwriter and you're going in to record a song and you don't really have musicians or anything yet. The guru has a network of really diverse musicians. They have a Rolodex of drummers, guitar players, bass players, violinists, horn players, and all that. And they will pick and choose who are the right musicians to bring on for each project. And it doesn't have to be for an entire album. They can have different musicians for each song. It all depends on what the guru producer hears in each song and what that person imagines a good player on that song would be, right? What good musician. Let me see. They may not necessarily be a gearhead. They may not necessarily be the person going behind the soundboard. They just have like a really good ear and a good feel of what something should sound like. So like Rick Rubin, I don't know if you guys have heard of Rick Rubin. He's someone that would be a guru producer. He's also a really great engineer. So he's like a guru producer that brings a lot to the table, right? Then and the guru producers also Uh, so they're literally part of every step from the pre-production to the final mastering. So they literally see the entire song throughout. And again, they may not be the ones mixing and mastering, or tracking either. They're going to send it out, or bring in the right people that are doing all those different parts. Then you have the songwriter producer. They pretty much just do what's best for the song. They can contribute musically and lyrically. They play multiple different instruments. They might be the engineer, or they might bring in engineers. And this is usually for like folk songwriters, like bluegrass, like bands like Mumford & Sons, Lumineers. They usually have like this type of producer that's more like a songwriter. They can play all kinds of instruments and can contribute musically and lyrically to the song. Then you have what Ari calls the all-in producer. So they typically have like a home studio. They'll do the tracking, mixing, and mastering themselves. There's huge different levels of these all-in producers. You have ones at like very low levels, very cheap. And I usually call those people that are literally just tracking and mixing and not really offering much else in terms of value. But then there's all-in producers that are really good. I have some really good ones here in Orlando that will track, mix, and then they'll usually maybe send it off for mastering, because mastering is always good to have a different set of ears on a song. Sometimes these all-in producers know how to create beats. They know how to play multiple different instruments. They're part of the process, kind of like the guru from beginning to the end, and maybe not in the mastering part, right? So those are like usually the most variety of different levels when it comes to like the all-in producer. Then you have the different types of engineers that'll work on your song. The ones that do the tracking. So these are literally the ones just when you're in the studio that are just hitting record, and they're making sure that each track is getting recorded. So those are just like the tracking engineers. Then you have a mixing engineer. So for those of you that don't like profanity, I'm going to say earmuffs. But mixing engineers turn shit into gold. So basically what that means is when a song doesn't sound that well yet, because it's like in demo mode and it's only been tracked, they can literally take a song that may just sound okay and turn it into something that can be a top 10 song or a Grammy Award winning song. So having a really good mixing engineer is extremely important. So they're like one of the most valuable people on the production process. Then you have the mastering engineers. So like a lot of times once it goes through the mixing process, it's good to have a second set of ears on the song. And they just really work on bringing out the different highs and lows in the song. They typically make the song louder. So by that, they help balance everything out to make it like radio friendly, right? Because the last thing you want is, and it's radios and PlayStations won't do this anyway, but if you listen to a song on radio, and you hear this on college radio a lot, the volume of one song might be at one level. So let's say on your radio dial in your car, you might have it on 50 for one song, and the next song comes on and it's like super loud and you have to turn it down to like 20, and it feels like the same volume as the other song, right? So the mastering engineers just make sure it's all balanced and working cohesive with what else is out there and being currently played on radio or Spotify and so on. So I just want to make sure that there's no drastic volume change from the super well produced song into now your song. You make sure that the volume sounds the same on radio, and still all the highs and lows are balanced well to go along with what the current industry standard or trend is. So how do you find these different producers and engineers, right? In Music Business 1, we did this exercise called the Artist ID. So let me pull that slide up. Let's see. Let's go to my Google Chrome. So here's that podcast episode with Davey J that I told you guys about. So here's the Artist ID exercise. In Music Business 1, we did this exercise where you have different artists, right? So I have listed artists A through J. Then we figure out who's their agency, then who's their agent, and what category these artists in. I'm not going to go through these categories right now because that's not important for this class. But this exercise is great to figure out, even as artist managers, right? Who or artists that are similar to your artist, what agency are they being represented by, and who's their agent. So you're going to see a lot of overlap and stuff there. But in the purpose for this lecture, just add a couple more rows or columns here. You can add another column now and say, who's the producer for artist A, right? Is it Rick Rubin? That could be a producer, right? Then here you want to do mixing, mastering. The tracking doesn't really matter, so I'm gonna take that one out. So then here you're gonna put engineer. We'll put engineer A, and this is engineer B, right? So this person mixed the album, this person mastered the album, and you can go down through all your artists, and these, you might have multiples of these, right? You might have, so like, let's say you add a row above. Let's say this is for album 1. So album 1, sorry, I just want to center it. And then you add another set of columns, and this is for album 2. And this might be different, right? I don't know, say Jack Antonoff. Yep, spell that right. Is the producer on the second album. And he has different mixing engineers he brings in and different mastering engineers. This could also be different per song. So it all depends how you want to set up this your spreadsheet. But how do you find producers and mixing engineers and mastering engineers? Just by going through your list of other artists. And the great thing here is for this whole like A-list and stuff like that. So let's say this one is Taylor Swift. Let's say this one, what is the show I just did? Let's say, what else makes sense? Okay, let's say this one's Guns N' Roses. And then this emerging artist is a band called Grandson. And then your legacy act could be like Skid Row, right? And then if you had like one more row in here, this is your local band. And they don't have an agency, they don't have an agent, and they would be local, regional, that's one of the categories. And then find out who they're working with. Because if you have a local band that has an album out that sounds really good, figure out who's that producer. Because if you're an artist manager and this is your artist's first album, you're probably not going to get Rick Rubin or Jack Antonoff on their first album. So find who are the local bands, who are the emerging bands, and who are they working with, and maybe reach out to those different producers for your artist to work with. So that's kind of like how you can start looking. Oh, and then one of the, let me see, let's open up a, get out of here. Let's open up a blank page. And then a website that's really good to use is allmusic.com. And if you search an artist here, I'll keep moving the chat box around. So let's say you go in here and you search Foo Fighters. Now what you can do, you can click on discography, or I guess you just had all the albums just there. This is my favorite Foo Fighters album right here, Color and the Shape. You can click on that, click on credits, and voila. You even have it down to the people that are hand clapping on songs. This is a really awesome tool. So you have like the assistant engineers who designed the logos, who did the photography, right? Mastering, so Bob Ludwig did the mastering for this album. You have the mixing engineer right here. Trying to see if you have the main producer here. But this is like how you find all the credits, and this is how you find who the people are. Oh, here's the producer. Gil Norton is the producer for this album. But that's kind of how you find out who all these different players are, right? So when you do your artist ID, and you're trying to find producers and mixing engineers, mastering engineers, you can all find them here on allmusic.com, which is like a really great resource. And a lot of times they'll have a lot of like smaller independent artists on here. We're starting to run out of time. I don't want to go on too long with tangent, but if you put in Grandson, so a newer band, let's say you're working with a rock band, of course, like the Foo Fighters guys might be a little harder to get. So you go to this band, they just put out an album, a new one, what's there, Atlantic and Fuba Ramen. They're probably working with some big people, but it kind of gives you an idea of like who they're working with, right? And of course, smaller band, so much smaller team on the album as well. So that's a really good resource to use. So let me go back to the slides. Oh. Slides, there we go. All right, so back to the slides. And that's the artist ID exercise that we just did. And then record labels, I'm gonna be quick on this one because we go pretty deep on record labels in the music business too. The main thing here to know as an artist manager and as an artist, like the record label is a partner. So if you start, again, every artist is a business, the artist manager, their company is a business too. So now you have two businesses that are working together, the artist and the manager. Now, when you bring a label on board, that's another business you're bringing in as a partner, right? And of course, they want to be paid somehow. They want to have maybe some kind of ownerships, which is usually the master. They want to have some kind of role in being able to make money. And you hear about all these horror stories about labels and everything out there. And really, there's no such thing like most labels are not necessarily like trying to screw artists. It's just like artists not being very educated on the deals they're getting, or not getting very good advice. So it's important to find, again, we talked about earlier in module 1, it's important for artists to find a manager that they can trust, right? Trust is very, very important. And they just need to find some manager that can help them really make good decisions when it comes to bringing on partners to the team. Managers, just like artists, can't be desperate and just go sign the first deal that comes across the table, because that's the worst thing you can do. You don't want to sign the first deal. You want a label that's a real partner that brings value to what your needs are. And the different types of values a label can bring is money, right? So they can give you money to record an album, to have the dream team behind your album. They can give you money for what's called tour support, to put you on tour and open up for someone. Because like, let's say you go on a giant tour as your first tour. You open up for probably not an arena act, but let's say you open up for an artist that's playing amphitheaters or big theaters, like anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 capacity range, right? So small amphitheaters, or even like up to 5,000 capacity. There's definitely a lot of smaller bands on those types of shows. And going on a big tour like that is very expensive, especially when you're only making, say call it between $250 to $1,000 a day. So it's very important to have some money to go on that tour. And that's another value that a label can bring. They give you money so you can go on tour. They can also give you money to make really cool, expensive, and highly produced music videos. So that's one of the values a label can bring. A label also can bring sponsorships. Right? They have a network of resources of helping you get different types of sponsorships, getting your music played, like getting your music on like Urban Outfitters playlists. Like you walk on Urban Outfitters, your music is playing, or anything else, right? Like getting your music on preferred lists on Spotify, getting your music on radio. So like there's that component as well. So I guess that's not necessarily sponsorships, but sponsorships or resources. And then marketing, which is I guess the resources part. Getting your music on these different playlists and all these different stores and restaurants or on TV shows, commercials, getting you and Jimmy Fallon. All those are different things that a label has the ability to offer and bring to the table. The other important thing on the label is the A&R, because the A&R is the person that's going to sign you to the label. And A&R stands for artist and repertoire. So they represent the artist and their repertoire, and they bring that to the label. And they their role is to find and nurture new talent, and they are the ones who work creatively with the artist, so they can contribute creatively as well. So that's an important thing to be careful with, because some A&Rs want songwriting credits. Sometimes you see co-writers on a song that are A&Rs. Sometimes you have those A&Rs that are literally just following the trends. So let's say there's like something that's very new and trendy in the music industry that's on the charts and it's doing extremely well. They'll just try to find a bunch of other artists that just sound like that and then just try to make money. They're literally just more in the money-making business than the creating art business. But there are still a few like legendary A&Rs, and there are some newer like A&Rs that are very creative and can write songs and can write really good poems. And depending on what you are looking for in someone, right? If you are following a certain genre that's making a lot of money right now, and you just want to make some money, manager and the artist, that's fine. And find an A&R that's into that. If you want an A&R that is very creative and can contribute to the songwriting, then look for someone like that. Or if you want an A&R that's really good at the business stuff and really will go to bat for you at the label, but wants nothing to do with the creative part, and you are 100% fine with that because you want nobody else touching your music, then find an A&R like that, right? And it's also very important to be aware of an A&R that, so if you want someone that's really going to develop and work and be there and go to bat for you, it's important to make sure you don't find someone that's just into song math, right? So it's like literally song math on how you can make money off of a song by following different formulas, and finding someone that's going to stick it out long term. Because Bruno Mars and Katy Perry, very successful artists, their first 1 or 2 A&Rs didn't stick it out long term. They just wanted to make some money real quick, and it didn't work out. And 5-6 years later, all of a sudden, they become brilliant songwriters and make a ton of money, and they're amazing artists as well. And these first A&Rs completely missed out on Bruno Mars and Katy Perry. So it's important to know that a songwriter at age 18 is very different from a songwriter at age 22, right? So that same songwriter 4 years later, just because they're like not amazing at 18 doesn't mean they won't be better by the time they get 20 to 22. Because if they are following pillar one and they're putting in the work and they're writing every day, they're gonna get better. And after 4 years, so if you're the A&R, you sign someone because you like their songs at 18, and it's an artist that has work ethic, and let's say their first album flop, it doesn't mean that by the time they're 22, 23, that they're not all of a sudden writing great songs, right? So if you find an artist as an A&R or as a manager that had something that you liked from the get-go, it's important to be patient and know that they're just going to keep getting better. So those are kind of the two important elements I wanted to touch on when it comes to labels. Just the partnership thing, what they can bring to the table, and then what to like and look for in an A&R. The last thing I want to cover is the midterm assignment that's coming up. It's kind of like midterm. It's more like two-thirds of the way in. It's not going to be due until November 3rd, so you have a little bit of time. It's not going to be due on the same week that a quiz is due. It's going to be due on the week that, on an opposite week of that. So I think this is between module 4 and 5. The artist manager assignment is you're going to find an artist manager. Let me pull up my list. And it's going to be one from my list, my pre-selected list. Go to Google Chrome. Let's go to, go away. Sorry, this is not letting me move this down. And go here, right? Artist managers. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna send out this link to this Google Doc. And I only want each student to be working on one manager per student, right? So I don't want 4 of you doing Colonel Tom Parker. It's only 1 per. So if I go in here and I want to do Birdman from Cash Money Records, then I'm writing my name in. I'm locked. Please don't delete someone's name. I can look up if that name has been deleted or not on Google Docs. I can see what changes have been made. But I'm gonna give you all access to change this document. Sorry about that. Call coming in. All right. So I have access to see who has changed this document. So please just be respectful of the rest of the class and don't just delete someone's name. But I'm gonna send you guys this link. If you kind of know a manager on here that you are super passionate about, I'll of course jump on it and go in right away, right? If you want like Scooter Braun, who's probably gonna be a popular one. Hopefully there's some Chef Gordon fans that people are gonna jump on. But regardless, don't even let me influence you guys. But you're gonna come in here, you're gonna select the manager, and then that's a manager you're gonna do a presentation on. And I'm gonna send you guys the parameters on those presentations as well. It's kind of telling their backstory, their artists they're working with, and then some pros and cons about what they did, and then kind of like your own critique of the manager, of like how that would relate to the style of manager you would want to be, or the type of manager you as an artist, if you're an artist, that you'd want to have or look for, right? So there's some really great managers here, and there's also some managers that you'll find some horror stories on. So depends on where you want to go with this. If you want to find a great manager, or just someone that'll be a really fun for an assignment, like Colonel Tom Parker could be a fun one. Peter Grant, guy from Led Zeppelin, that could be a very, very fun one. So it's up to you guys what you want to do with this. I think this will be a fun assignment. And then what I'll do is you're going to upload these all to YouTube. You can do it as unlisted like I do with my lectures. And then I'll send out all the videos to everyone if you guys want to see what other students did for this class. Can you just go back to the slides one more time? So that is that. And Jenna's the only one in the room. I'll open up the floor to you if you have any questions. If anyone else has any questions, you guys can just email me, send me a message on Canvas. And again, grades should be done for Module 2 by the end of this week. And I will send out the Module 3 quiz either today or tomorrow. And as always, go see shows, meet people, make stuff. And this right there in this picture is the manager, Chef Gordon, we had in the last week's lecture. My favorite manager. If you guys want to learn a lot about artist management, this is something I thought of over the weekend. So as starting next semester, because I can't make you guys add a book in the middle of the semester, his book is awesome. And that's going to be a recommended or required reading for next semester's artist management class. So you guys got away with just one book this semester. But if anybody's any questions or anything, again, send me a message. I will send out the quiz soon, and hope everyone has a good, productive, and successful week. And I will talk to you all soon. Have a good day.